Hi, I'm Brian Hurley with Business Performance Improvement. I'd like to talk to you about an electricity reduction project I worked on with a large manufacturing company, and how I walked them through a 5-step process, help them save $300,000 a year. So through this project, I'll explain how I engaged the staff and experts in helping improve the process, how we went around and collected and analyzed data even though there wasn't much available. I'll talk about how we created a model for how to estimate and predict electricity usage, and also talk about how we were able to deal with employee pushback and potential resistance to the project. So I value your time, so let's jump right in. When I first engaged in the problem, I realized that there was a lot of money being spent, and I also realized that there wasn't very much data to be able to break down the data in much detail. So that's probably one of the challenges and reasons why they hadn't tackled this problem in the past. The organization was looking for a more structured way to go after electricity reduction, and with a large building, they really needed a methodology to go prioritize the work, because it's daunting for a lot of people to not even know where to get started. And they're also looking for a way to predict their usage based on other factors like temperature and number of employees and things like that, instead of just looking at the last month comparison or the year-over-year comparison. The 5-step process we're going to go through is called DMAIC, and it stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. And this is the core structure that is taught through the Six Sigma methodology. So I'll go through and show what we accomplished in each of these phases. So the first define phase is to explain what the problem is and why the management team should be interested in doing a project around it. So when we calculated up that it was $4 million a year, it was easy to get management support for that. Even if we were able to save 1% or 2% or 5%, it would be a really good cost benefit and big cost savings opportunity. As we were looking through the data a little bit, we realized that the building was large at over 1 million square feet. But again, that detail of where is the usage for electricity coming from inside the building was unknown. And a lot of the team members had a lot of great ideas, but we had no data to go off of. So that was our first big challenge, is figure out how can we measure the data at the level of detail to be able to solve this problem. So we had the data from the utility bills that we could look at month to month, and that was helpful. We also did find out that we had 5-minute increment data for the whole building, but that didn't give us the detail of where in the building the electricity was coming from. So we were able to take advantage of some of the data we had, but we definitely had some gaps. We also did a lot of observations and walking around looking for the different substations to figure out how the electrical system was hooked up inside the building. We call that a Gemba walk in our process improvement methodology. Looking at the 5-minute increment data, we started to do a little bit of analysis and chart the data out. And what this chart shows is that during the normal work days, you can see the 5 spikes there. That represents the 5 days of the week, Monday through Friday. The 2 days on the next to it represent the weekends. And you can see that there is definitely a drop-off, as you would expect, on the weekend. But what we were surprised to see is that the drop-off was not as large as we expected. We thought that there would be a much bigger drop-off, and so the opportunity seemed to be that there was a lot of electricity being used on off hours, not when people are there. So that gave us one thing that we could dig into and pursue, just looking at the overall usage. So charting and graphing out your data and looking for the patterns and the pictures of the data can be very helpful. So we got together with the team and we started to brainstorm what are the things that are running and using electricity during off hours. Things like test chambers, test equipment, computers and lights, heating and cooling systems, emergency lights, our data centers and servers, labs running tests, and things that are plugged in the outlets. Also the parking lots are on, and so is the alarm systems. A lot of the ideas though we kept coming back to where the heating and cooling system, or the HVAC system. And so that's where we started to focus a little bit. But we didn't really have much data to go off of other than our gut feel and expertise in the room. The next thing we did is we spent a lot of time gathering data. So we went around to different parts of the building. There were over 50 substations that we had to find in the building and then go manually collect data at different days and times during the work schedule, and including the weekends and nights. We also included holidays in that. So we tried to gather multiple data points on each of the substations, and that gave us this pie chart that could best represent the breakdown of the data based on where those substations were hooked up to. So initially we could see that HVAC was near the top of our list, so was our manufacturing area, and so was lighting. And then the rest of it was either unknown or not a big driver. So this helped us prioritize and focus our attention on one of these two leading drivers. The one thing that was interesting is that the HVAC system was also on our list before, showing that it was one of the things that was running on the weekends or at night, part of that ongoing baseload amount. We also stayed away from the manufacturing area because we didn't want to try to impact or affect the way in which the work was being done. And so we naturally gravitated towards the HVAC system. We also took a look at the data we had by month, and one of the Six Sigma tools we can apply is called Regression Analysis. And that allows us to take a look at our data and then match it up with other factors in the process and see which ones are affecting or correlating with the results. We were able to look at the chart itself, and there was definitely patterns that were going on. You can see that it spikes up during the summer months and it drops back down in the winter and spring months. And so that initially told us that probably temperature is a big driver of the electricity, and that was no surprise. Through the regression modeling, we can plug in the temperature each month on average and match that up with the utility bill. And you can see that with the model we created, the red line on the chart, we can get fairly close to predicting what the usage will be just by knowing the temperature. But we could get a little bit better. That explained about 50% of the variation in the model, but we could get a little bit better if we included other factors. So again, we got our team together and we brainstormed other reasons why there may be ups and downs month to month in the electricity usage. We came up with a couple other factors, as you see on the left side of this slide there. We included how many output of items we had in terms of spares, how many top level output items we had, how many working days were in the month. You know, some months we had more than others due to holidays or the way the weeks lined up. We also looked at the billing days in the electric bill. Not every bill is the same number of days. And we looked at employee count. How many people were actually in the building that month? And when we did the regression analysis, you could see that our model came out even stronger. The red line seems to match much closer to the black line. And it included an equation that represented those key factors: the temperature, the spares output, and the employees. Those are the ones that are the primary drivers. And that explained 75% of the variation month to month. So we had multiple approaches. We used the regression model, which pointed to the outside temperature, which indirectly means that it's pointing us to the HVAC system, which is affected by the outside temperature. We also did our data analysis where we walked around and we collected measurements off the substations, and that told us that HVAC was one of our biggest items on the pie chart. We also did the analysis on the base load, and we saw that the drop-off from the workday to the weekend was not as much as we thought. So there was something going on using a lot of energy on overnight and on the weekends. And that, again, we all kind of agreed that HVAC might be a big driver there. And then from the very beginning of the project, we were getting feedback that people were saying, I think there's opportunity in the HVAC system, but we don't have any data to support that. So we had 4 different methodologies with varying levels of detail in our data that all were pointing us to the HVAC system. I think this gave us, the management team, a lot of confidence that we had multiple methods that we used and all arriving at the same outcome and area to focus on. And in our projects, we really want to stay focused and prioritize because we don't want to try to solve everything at once. So through the analysis and the data, we were able to determine that HVAC was our biggest opportunity. Now the next thing would be figuring out why is it on all the time, and what can we do about it? And so through the discussions with the team, we realized that that was the best opportunity for us to improve, is to reevaluate why the equipment and the heating and cooling systems were on 24/7. So we decided we could do a pilot project in one area of the building, and that would be a safe way to try to test out some of our ideas. So the pilot project was isolated to a small area, but it was an area that we could easily measure and monitor the results, and then we have a limited scope on the number of employees we'd have to interact with. So that allowed us to run some surveys, get some feedback, test out this idea, understand and capture some of the pushback we might get, and then come up with a way to communicate this out, and then measure to see if it actually did work, if we were able to go in and change the setback points. Through the analysis, we basically went in and looked at each of the zones in the building and how they were being used, and we determined what the setback would be when most employees leave. And the idea was that we would let, in the summertime, we would let the temperature ramp up maybe 8 or 10 more degrees than normal. And in the winter, we would shut off the heat and let it drop down 8 or 10 degrees. So we didn't let it get too cold or too hot, but we did cut back on the amount of electricity being used. And through that pilot, we had a lot of success. We were able to show that there was quite a bit of savings we could get in that small area, and we extrapolated that out over a larger building size rollout. We estimated we could save hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now in the control phase, we wanted to figure out how do we maintain these results? What happens if over a couple months people start to complain about the temperatures and they don't like it? And then people revert back to going to the 24/7 settings just to reduce employee pushback and complaints. So it turned out we actually had a lot of override buttons available, and the override buttons would allow the employee to press a button and they would get the typical settings for heat or cool temperatures in that area for 2 hours at a time. So if they did come in at a time when the setback was in play and it was too cold or too hot for them, they could press the button and then the system would kick in and give them 2 hours of normal work environment. And that really helped alleviate some of the pushback or concerns we had from the staff and employees about our idea. So what impact did we have? After we were able to go in and change the 122 air handler units, we were able to capture about $2,500 in savings per air handler unit, or about $300,000 in electricity savings per year. We also had the equivalent of reducing 4 million kilowatt hours, which is the same as 1,782 tons of coal that we avoided being consumed. That was equivalent to powering 400 homes per year in electricity. It reduced the usage of 2,000 acres of trees equivalents, and it took the equivalent of 500 vehicles off the road. We've applied these same concept and approach to other facilities that they had, and identified very similar opportunities in terms of lighting reduction or setback points or parts of the area of the organization and then the building that they could look at for improvement. So the methodology allowed us to help identify and prioritize the improvements. Typically what we see is that everybody just throws out ideas, but there's no data to back it up, and there's no way to cost justify it. And so one of the reasons I think this project was very successful is we had a lot of research and investigation and data to support what we were doing. So the management was more than willing to go in and pursue and invest in the implementation throughout the whole building, because they saw that our pilot project was successful and we had good ROI calculations of what they would actually save. So this methodology works for lots of different things, not just electricity reduction. You could use it to help a supplier, and we did that and saved about $500,000 by helping them to reduce some of the waste they generated and by fixing some of the quality issues. This methodology can work for helping improve recycling rates at a football stadium, which is what I was able to work on another similar project. I was also able to help this methodology help a production organization double their output by reevaluating the way they did testing and avoid the purchase of additional equipment, which are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this can be applied in other areas like in healthcare by looking at the differences in blood test results in a community, comparing lab to lab and trying to clean up the differences that we are observing for patients that are getting treated for a medical condition. So to summarize, I was able to help an organization save $300,000 a year in electricity using the 5-step DMAIC methodology without even a lot of expertise in electricity and being an electrician by trade. I'm really passionate about applying Lean and Six Sigma methodology to the environment, and I want to help you find your passion around problems and issues at your work or at home or maybe a local nonprofit that you work with. Feel free to schedule some time with me below and we can chat and I can help you out and guide you in your journey through process improvement. And you can have a big impact on your work or in your community or on the environment as well. Thanks for your time.